What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 64 of the Steam Deck podcast, Flip Screen Games weekly podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Big week, Steve. Big week
Massive.
on the podcast. We have a brand new Steam Deck to talk about, the Steam Deck OLED.
I know. Actually can't quite believe it, to be honest. Like we knew that there was going to be a revision coming. We spoke about it a few weeks ago that they put a version through with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi 6. I did not expect the level of revision that we've got with the OLED screen and then so much more underneath. Like it's not just the screen they've changed. This whole thing is like a complete rework of the Steam Deck as we know it.
So let's talk about that. Well, obviously, the headline is the screen, right? We know an OLED screen is, I think, one of the top requests that we've seen for the Steam Deck for as long as it's been around, right? We've been a part of that chorus of saying like that's one of the few things that we would consider an upgrade for, right? Would be a nice OLED screen, maybe better battery life. So what
We got
we
both of those.
we
We got
got both
a
of
better
those.
screen and we got a better battery life. And the screen I want to focus on first is a 7.4-inch OLED display, which is a slightly bigger screen up from 7 inches. So the look of the Steam Deck for the most part remains the same. It looks like a Steam Deck, feels like a Steam Deck, but the bezels of the screen are a little bit smaller to accommodate that larger display. Of course, it's an OLED, has full RGB striping, no pentile matrix or anything like that, so it's going to look really crisp. But there's a couple of other things about the screen. It's got improved touchscreen responsiveness. It now polls for touch at 180 hertz versus I think it was 120 on the previous screen. It's a 90 hertz display panel instead of a 60 hertz, so you can go up to 90 frames per second in games that will support it.
Massive.
But it's also HDR, up to 1000 nits of brightness, up from 400 nits on the current Steam Deck display. So it's going to pump out ridiculously vibrant, deep, rich blacks and just stupid brightness on parts of the game that need it. And they've put a lot of work into SteamOS 3.5, so presumably the stable version of SteamOS 3.5 will ship alongside the OLED version of the Steam Deck. Uh, the HDR support just works in all of these games. All you need to do is just toggle it on. And games that don't support, you can toggle on like a mode to display it always in HDR and tweak how you display the content, the SDR content on that display.
Wild. Just a wild number of upgrades that are really meaningful, right? Like those are some massive upgrades. And I mean, we kind of glossed over the idea of the bigger battery, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, right? It's a 50 watt what's that for? Not watt, it's
Yeah, it's 50 watt hours up from 40 watt
watt
hours.
hours.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
So up from 40, which when you get into what that actually means, you're looking at 30 to 50% increase in battery life depending on what
Yeah.
you're playing, but that's
I mean
that's
that
huge.
there's like multiple factors playing into the battery life. So obviously we've got the bigger battery. But the screen itself, obviously being OLED, uses less power than an LCD. It doesn't have a backlight that's always on. And we've got a
Isn't that
smaller
wild?
fabrication process now for the APU. So it's 6 nanometers versus 7 nanometers. It's a more efficient chip in there, which is what I kind of figured they would do with the scale down on the process. I didn't think we'd get any more performance out. They've basically done exactly what Nintendo did with their 2 revisions. We've got a smaller nanometer process, which gives us better battery life, but it also gives us better thermals. It's a lot cooler. And we then also get the much nicer OLED screen. It's exactly what Nintendo's done on the Switch, which was a massive success, and I would imagine it's gonna be a massive success here as well.
So one of the other, big features that we've seen here is we got a bigger fan, which means we've got cooler and quieter device as well, which obviously has become less of an issue over time. But I think that was one of the things that early adopters talked about, right? You had to get your fan replaced. Certainly something that is nice to see them work on for the second, or I guess not the second revision, the first proper revision of the device.
I think this is a pretty big deal, to be honest. The larger the fan, the slower it can spin, so the quieter it can be, and that combined with the smaller APU, more efficient APU, it's going to be so much quieter. I think I watched Digital Foundry did a video on it. They measured it around 2 decibels quieter, and obviously decibels is logarithmic, so every decibel that goes up, it's like a massive step. So 2 decibels is a big improvement.
There's also some other again, like, a lot of this is quality of life stuff, but it's stuff that I think addresses a lot of the really common, complaints, talking points, whatever you wanna call them. We're looking at about a 5% decrease in overall weight of the device as well because the, LCD screen, they weigh quite a bit more than OLEDs, which is another thing I don't think I realized that OLEDs are, not only do they look better, they're more energy efficient, they're lighter, it's like obviously they're more expensive to produce, but in every other way, it's a meaningful upgrade. The
Yeah, I mean,
Steam Deck's weight is again one of the few talking points that, come back to bite it when you start comparing it to some of its other handheld PC competition.
yeah, I think you're probably right in that regard. Like the ROG Ally, I think, is the one that probably comes to mind when you think about the weight reduction. I wonder how much the ROG Ally actually weighs in comparison now. It's probably getting close. It's 30-gram difference, right? So the ROG Ally weighs 608 grams, and the Steam Deck weighs currently uh 669 grams. So there's still around a 30-gram difference between the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, but that's a pretty we're getting pretty close. And the weight
Yeah.
distribution on the Steam Deck was already pretty good. Like it felt good in my hands anyway. To have it way less, I think is going to be no one's going to complain about that.
No, it's just another boon, right? It's like one of these other things, right? Like louder speakers with better bass. Is that something I was sitting there nickel and diming every time I was playing on the Steam Deck that it needed better speakers? No, but I certainly appreciated having better speakers, right? Like these are the types of upgrades that, really I think make you consider an upgrade because it's like, yeah, sure, the OLED screen is one thing, but then when you start getting into all of these other little
Yeah,
quality of life
I agree.
improvements, that's attractive to me, man.
I think if it was one or the other, right? Like if it's just better battery life or just an OLED display, that's when I'm like, oh, I don't think I need to upgrade at this point. But when I'm looking at the whole list of changes that they've done, like it goes far and wide and addresses pretty much every concern and every issue and every gripe that me and you have spoken about on this podcast at length of what we would do to improve in the next Steam Deck.
It's
We'd
something we
improve the
haven't even
screen.
thought
We'd
of.
improve the battery life, right?
Like, one of these is faster resume time by 30%. I didn't think it was slow to begin with. A 30% increase on something that I was already happy with? That's big. Like, that is the stuff that you and I were talking about when the, current gen consoles came out, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
it's those little things that just make you wanna spend more time on the device, right? That extra 30% less getting your game back up, right? Or switching between games. Those are nice changes. Those are things that you're gonna appreciate when, you're using the thing every day.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the resume time is when you turn on from sleep, and I, like you, have never really thought, "Oh, this is really slow. Come on, hurry up and turn on."
No.
I've never had an issue with it. And that speed, resume time increase by 30% is a direct cause of the faster RAM that they put in this. So switched to faster LPDDR5 modules. Um, and I I think, looking at Digital Foundry's video that they did, which we'll put a link to, that's also had a knock-on effect with performance across the board, which I did not expect. When they announced the OLED model, I thought, okay, it's gonna have a nicer screen and we're gonna have better battery life. But they did not once mention performance. And Valve have been very particular to say that performance is the same as the current model, and they're still targeting that model internally, and all of the developers that are speaking to, they're still targeting the original Steam Deck performance. But Digital Foundry did some tests across the board. They saw on average 2 to 3 more frames per second, less stutter overall. They were getting 8.9% more performance in Cyberpunk, 5.6% in Forza Horizon, 8.3% in Plague Tale Requiem, and 7.4% in Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, the original version.
There's a quote
Um,
here that I thought was really compelling where they said, "We couldn't find any example where the OLED model was the same speed or slower."
so it's
Slower,
always faster, right?
you'd want, right? But, like, you couldn't find one example where it wasn't faster? Wow. That's awesome, right? And it's like you said, maybe it's not enough of a difference to make it its own SKU or to make this huge performance gap between folks that have an OG model and folks that end up grabbing the OLED. But it's that I think it's probably more similar to like what you'd expect from like the PS4 to the PS4 Pro, right? Or the 3DS to the new 3DS, where it's like, hey, it runs better. It's got a little extra pep in its step. It boots quicker. Yeah, maybe 7.4% in Spider-Man isn't the biggest jump, but it's enough of a jump that you'll notice it, right? It's enough that you can
That could
eke out
also
a
be
little
enough
more
for you
power.
to get Yeah, it could be enough for you to get to a frame rate that's playable. Like, it could get you from 27 frames per second to 30, or it might just get you over 40 frames per second, right? In some games, those 2 to 3 frames per second that you get on that in performance improvement, I think are meaningful. But again, if this was just the only change they'd made, like it was just this marginal
Yeah.
performance improvement from the new memory modules, it's not worth upgrading for just that. It's the whole package you're looking at, right? There's other improvements across the board. We've got Wi-Fi 6E, which we knew about. That's really only meaningful if you've got super fast internet and you've got a Wi-Fi 6E router in your house. But it's nice to have that included and make it future proof because more and more people will get Wi-Fi 6 routers as time goes on. Bluetooth 5.3 with dedicated antenna. That means that when you're docked now, specifically, the Bluetooth's just going to be a little bit more reliable than it is currently. And I think my favorite feature, which they did not really advertise and was hidden in the depths, is Wake via Bluetooth
Let's
controller. So you can.
go! We can do it. You don't need to buy a Steam controller to do it anymore. It's amazing.
So now with the new OLED model, you'll be able to just use an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller and just turn on your Steam Deck from across the room like any other console.
You love it. You love to see it. This is another one of
Yeah,
the
I
major things we requested, right? We were ready to buy a whole
yeah,
extra peripheral for it, and it's like, hey, great, it's there.
I know. I don't know why they never built that into, like, the dock. Like, they could have made that in built that into the dock rather than needing it to be part of the actual Steam Deck itself, but, it makes sense, I guess, that it's now here thanks to Bluetooth 5.3, which is good.
Sure. Yeah, I'm definitely not upset, right? It's like if we got it, we got there.
Mhm.
Good enough. So let's talk about some of the other improvements because we've hit a bunch of them, but there's still somehow more to go. Which really like a lot of this stuff seems like stuff I would have assumed would have been in the wings until a successor, right? Like we got new trackpads for improved fidelity and edge detection. There's a brand new case that they're bragging about that's got like a new removable lining. There's like this like kind of like Velcro addition. You can like put it within. There's like a case within a case, basically.
Yeah, it's really cool because I know a lot of people like the case that the Steam Deck comes with, but if you use any kind of grip or anything like a D-brand kill switch, it no longer fits in the case. Or people think the case is too bulky because there's a lot of padding around it and they're just going to be putting it into another bag anyway, so they don't necessarily need all of that. You can now use like this Velcro to kind of take out the internal module, and you can either just put your Steam Deck in there in the kill switch if you use one of those, or you can put the internal section which still zips up, and just you take that with you in another bag, so you not have this really bulky case in your bag anymore, which I think is a really really cool design. It's something that I don't think any other company would really look at and think to do. But because there's been such a kind of a market around the Steam Deck and building all these accessories with stuff like the kill switch being so popular, the fact that Valve even considered doing this rather than just using the exact same case that they've already got and have already been manufacturing, the fact that they went out of their way to do, I think is really cool. And I like the fact that the logo on the case now is the orange color, to match the
It's pretty
orange
cool.
power button that's on the top of the OLED model of the Steam Deck, which is really cool.
Yeah, very very cool. So some of the other stuff we've got. This was one. It says Torx with metal thread screws replace Phillips head and plastic pegs to make opening easier. Talk.
Yeah.
This is. I'm not sure what a Torx. I'm not
Oh,
familiar
so
with that term.
Torx screws, they are like the star-shaped screw instead of the
Oh,
Phillips
okay.
screw.
That's like the
So
one
they
that
are
the Switch uses, right?
Yeah, no, that's a tri-wing. That uses 3. Talks, you might
Okay.
see on the bottom of your bottom of your phone, um, they look like little stars, basically.
Okay.
And they've got, I think it's 6 or 8 points on them, and they're much harder to strip. A Phillips head can strip so easily,
Oh,
especially if
yeah.
you undo and redo it up a lot of times. And the screws in the current Steam Deck, they just screw into plastic, whereas now they've made the pegs and the threads that the screws screw into metal, so they're a lot more durable over time. So you can undo and get into your Steam Deck a lot more reliably than you could with the original model.
Makes sense why you'd wanna prioritize that, right, as a feature set when you've got so many tinkerers in the audience, for sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, I know, and it's so cool that they even considered that, right? That they made a point to say it's easier to repair and it's easier to mod, for trained professionals, of course, they put as a caveat, and they're gonna be putting the replacement parts and guides over with iFixit again, for the new model, which is really nice to see that they're
Yeah.
continuing that partnership.
Love to see that. Love to see that. So, there's also, new black sticks that have, they're, like, more beveled now. They have, like, a more pronounced indent that, depending on, I guess, your taste, right? Some folks like to prefer that for an easier grip. Um, they also seem to have, and maybe is this just on the limited one that they have the orange underneath, or is that
That's
for
just on the
everyone?
limited model, yeah.
Okay. I'm showing that off right now for the kids, so let's
Oh,
talk about that.
that is a yeah, that's a limited edition model. It's only coming to the US and Canada in limited quantities, at launch, and it's the 1 terabyte model, so it has the same etched glass display, because that's something we haven't even spoken about, right? Is the storage options have changed, but the limited edition model is this gorgeous, smoky, translucent color, and then it's got orange accents everywhere. It's got like the orange sticks, orange power button, orange vent
Fan.
grill. The screws are all orange on the back. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm so sad that I can't get one of these.
So you're limited to 1 per account per week, it says,
That's
right?
on any of the new Steam Deck OLED models, so you can only buy one of them per account per week. I
So
think the limited edition model is going to be even more limited than that, I would imagine.
well, I guess we'll see. Because if they'll let me order 2, I'll order you one, but I'm getting one, right? Like, I gotta get one of these, dude. I can't sit here and say, "Oh, if they upgraded this, that, this, and that, then I do it," and then they do it, and I'm like, "Ah, whatever." You know? It's like, "Come on,
Mhm.
I think I got a bite. I think I gotta get this limited edition guy."
Well, that model is I don't know how much it is in America because I can't view the pricing, so you'll have to look that up. But that's the 1 terabyte model with the anti-glare display, which is £569 in the UK. So that one replaces the 512 gigabyte model. The 256 gig model is being replaced with a £479 512 gigabyte model with an OLED display. And then they're completely getting rid of the 64 gig model. They're making the base now 256 gigabytes, and that
Good.
comes with an LCD display. So it's the same Steam Deck that you know now. That starts at £309, which I think is the exact same price points that they're hitting at the moment. So 309, 479, and 569, and then whatever that is in your region.
So, I've got the pricing pulled up for the American folks. It's $399 for the 256 LCD, 549 for the 512 OLED, 649 for the 1 terabyte OLED, and 179 for the limited edition.
Yeah. I really want the limited edition. It's gorgeous. I'd be happy with any of them, to be honest. And
Are you gonna get
uh,
one?
I would like to. I don't know if I've got the budget for it at the moment, but I would really love to get one. But
That's what
we'll
credit
have
cards
to
are for, my guy.
see.
Let's do it. Come on.
We'll see. I think there's a lot here to like, right? You know, the fact that we've spoken about all these changes, there's still even more. There's a new charger with a slightly longer cable, and they've made it
Which
even
is
more.
kinda silly because the regular one's already really long.
I
It's not,
know it
like,
is,
too
yeah.
long, but you're like, "Alright, great. I'd love a little more real estate, sure."
And, you don't need to take the back off anymore to replace the display, which is a huge improvement. That was one of the biggest repair tasks of the Steam Deck was
Right.
you had to take the back off, you had to take all the parts off to be able to access the display. They've now changed the way that the Steam Deck's built, we'll have to wait and see for the iFixit guides to see how it kind of all fits together. But you should now just be able to take the main display off the front without needing to get into the back of it. So if you ever break your display, it should be an easy replacement.
Nice. Not bad at all. So, November 16th.
And that's when pre-orders start. I don't know when they're going to be shipping. Probably a couple of weeks after that, I would imagine. Maybe sooner. We'll start seeing this in people's hands. But yeah, really exciting. I was surprised to see this drop today.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, we we've been waiting for something, right? Like all day, we knew that there was going to be a big
Yeah, because
announcement.
Joshua Ashton on the Gamescope team posted about it. Posted like a little tease. And they are the person responsible for getting HDR support in, all of the color space stuff, getting 90 hertz refresh rate in. They've put a lot of hard work in. And so I think they were quite excited about it and posted over on Mastodon and on X and stuff. So
I mean, if they knew anything that was going to come out of Digital Foundry's review of the product, they had to be excited
they
to.
did not. They did not. So they posted after
Okay.
the fact. Joshua posted after the fact. It was nice to see all the lovely reviews go out of all the work
I
that they've been
mean,
working on.
just to pull a few more, I know we talked a little bit about the performance and stuff from the Digital Foundry review, but I mean, some other pull quotes that are worth highlighting. The best handheld out there, bar none, and addressed every major criticism. And when talking about the display, they called it the best I've seen on any handheld. Huge, huge praise for this device. I mean, that's incredible, and I mean, especially when you consider that, as much as we love the Steam Deck, right? We've been evangelists of it since day one. Um, the screen was always, you know, it
Yeah,
was what it
especially when
was.
you're looking over the fence, right? Like what Aya Neo's doing, what the ROG Ally's doing, that they've got these nicer displays with high refresh rate or VRR on them, that they can run games a little bit better than the Steam Deck at sacrificing battery life. I mean, it really now is a case of, do you want, you can take the screen out of the equation because the Steam Deck clearly has the best screen out there, at least according to Digital Foundry. And I would imagine if it's an OLED display, none of the other handhelds really use OLEDs. It probably is the best display. But you can kind of take that out of the equation now, and it's whether you want the most performance you can possibly get at a sacrifice of battery life that is going to last you less than an hour, or if you want this larger battery life, but some games just won't run because the kind of cutting edge games like the Alan Wake 2s of the world just really can't run on the chipset that the Steam Deck's got.
Yeah.
And I think Valve have made the right compromises in the right places. 50% improvement on battery life is just phenomenal, like absolutely insane.
Yeah, yeah, that's a massive improvement. We also got the news that there's gonna be a price cut on the docking station, which is I think great. When we reviewed it initially, right, we said we thought it was generally worth the price because you'd be spending close to the cost of it to get a replacement charger anyway. So, I never thought the value was off, but we've also been very critical of the docked experience because by and large, it just hasn't really lived up to our expectations or its overall potential. So it is kind of nice to see there be even more incentive, I think, for people to consider picking that up because, I think it's increasingly becoming more attractive as it gets less expensive.
Yeah, I still struggle with recommending it to anyone as an experience.
Yeah.
The software side's just not there yet. But yeah, 69 quid for the Steam Deck docking station, I think is the one I would probably recommend for most people, because the firmware's updatable, and none of the other third party docks really kind of get that treatment
Yeah.
from the Steam Deck. I
There's
think that
still
alone makes
there's still
it
opportunity for growth
worthwhile.
based on
Yeah,
that,
there
right?
is.
Like
Yeah.
it can still improve.
Yeah, but I mean, we're like a year on from this thing coming out, and yet we're still missing features. You go to the Steam Deck docking station page, and it still says FreeSync support is in progress, update is forthcoming. It's still not really working on the 3.5 preview. Like, there is a lot there that needs to be done, but
Definitely.
yeah, I would imagine now that they've got the OLED model out of the way, and we're probably going to see the stable launch of 3.5, that their focus is going to move on to other things. Like, I would love to see the 3.5 general release and make it so we can store this on other devices, and then move on to other things like improving the docked experience. But really, it's a handheld, and the OLED if I do end up getting one of these, I'm gonna wanna play it handheld all the time anyway because it's just gonna
You
look
wanna see the
gorgeous.
OLED screen.
Yeah.
All right, so before we move on from talking about the OLED Steam Deck, which of course we're going to talk about a lot more in the weeks and months to come, we got a question here from the Discord. This one comes from Left Eye Lazy. You said, "Hello, am I finally justified for waiting and overthinking buying a console? Is this my golden moment in the community?" I think it is. I think you did it, man. You waited long enough. There's a much better option available for you now at the same price. Bravo, you did it.
Yeah, even if you are just like, "I don't care about the OLED, I just want a Steam Deck," you can now get a 256 gig model for the same price as the 64 gig model was, like, yesterday.
Yeah,
So, it was kinda worth waiting. I still
definitely.
think that if I'd bought a Steam Deck a couple of months ago, I still don't I'd like to think I wouldn't be upset about it because it is really uh, an update rather than like it's an evolution rather than a revolution.
Yeah.
It's minor improvements. It's a mid-gen refresh. In the same way that if I bought the PS5 and then the PS5 Slim came out, I wouldn't massively be upset
I
about
think
it.
I would be a little more upset about this because an OLED screen and like we talked about,
Yeah.
there's so many little improvements here that like the fact that you can basically get what is measurably a better device in every sense of the word for the exact same amount of money that you would have just spent. I could see feeling a little burned is probably not the right word because this stuff's got to come out at some point, but I would be like, "Oh man, like, especially if you had waited all this time and you finally pulled the trigger and it's like, great, now they announced the new one," right? Like I could see that. I could see feeling some kind of way about that. Whereas I think about like you and me and we've already got, you know, over a year's worth of enjoyment out of our launch device, like I wouldn't have wanted to wait for it considering how
No,
much
100%.
fun
No.
I've gotten out of it.
I mean, I've used this pretty much nonstop for 18 months. I use it pretty much every single day. There's no way I would have waited. Absolutely not. I still think my Steam Deck's a phenomenal device. I don't know if I'm gonna buy one of these. I'm gonna have to kinda wait and see, um, and hopefully I can make it work, but,
Come on, you're not
if
thinking about how you sell your base unit to get one of these guys? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm like,
the problem is, like, that base unit, the one I've got now is the base model, so,
yeah.
that's 349 quid in the UK now.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Is
I think what
I'm
you
gonna
gotta
sell
do
it for less.
I'm about to go jump on, like, Facebook Marketplace and be like, "Can I sell this before anybody learns about this new one?" You know? Just try to get my money back as quickly as possible.
Oh, yeah, see, maybe I mean, I'm still gonna be using mine kind of up until the day, but if you do wanna get one of the, LCD models, they're doing like a last chance while supplies, last kind of thing. You can get the 64 gig model now for £309. I don't know what this is in the USP.
Let me see.
And the 512 is 389, which is £90 less than the 512 OLED's gonna be. I think
Okay,
I'd
they've
probably
got
wait and do the 90, pay the 90 for the OLED screen personally.
yeah, I definitely agree. The 64 LCD is selling for 350 US and the 512 is 449.
What do you think about those price points?
I think they're bad. I think I don't know why any person would buy the 349 LCD when you could wait any amount of time and spend 50 more dollars and have, I guess unless you're planning on buying it and replacing, the on what's the word I'm looking for? The memory, right? Unless you're
The
gonna
SSD, yeah, yeah.
yeah, unless your plan was to do that, was to crack it open and update the SSD anyway. But even so, it's like there's a better right or
There's
no,
a
I
way
guess
better base model for like 40 more, right?
yeah, right, like, there's still improvements on it, right? So it's like, why would you not just wait?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that the base LCD model is the same one that you've already got, so there is gonna be
Yeah.
like a little bit of difference between them, but I think personally, if you're gonna get one and you were looking at like the 512 gig model anyway, then get the OLED model. It probably makes most sense.
Yeah, because again, it's like you're talking about a difference of, like, I mean, it's
It's
I guess it's
£90 in the UK.
$100, but, like,
Yeah.
that's still it's like it's such a big you get a better screen, you have better battery life, you've got, the better carrying case, like, the display is, what, 0.4 inches bigger. Like, it's like those are all things that it's like for $100, I would spend the money personally, but I definitely wouldn't bite on that 64. I don't think you should have bought it before. Now it's like, get out of here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that needed to be probably under 300 to make that like the let's get rid of the supplies kind of thing.
Yeah, if it was $300 even, I think I would be like, all right, yeah, it's $100 off.
Yeah,
Like,
but I mean, the refurb still exists, right? So you can get one of those in the UK for
yeah,
250 when it's refurb.
right.
Like,
But for
I
how
kind of
long
feel
though,
like,
right? Like, are those available
yeah,
right now? They all sold out pretty quickly, didn't they?
I would guess so. I mean, they're still advertising it on the new Steam Deck store page, so I would imagine they're gonna keep putting those back in stock as and when new Steam Decks come back in ready to be refurbed.
Yeah,
I don't know what the process is there though.
I guess we'll see. But either way, very exciting. Definitely something that's caught my attention. I'm definitely going to consider picking one of these up. Um, would love to like do an unboxing of the limited edition and everything. That'd be pretty cool. So, we'll have to see. We'll see. Have to see if we can get our hands on some. But I think we might have to make that work. So we've got crazy enough. We've got to talk about the Steam Deck 2 to get to in just a second here. But let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of November. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Asobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the real stuff, the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and show your support like they did, if you want to go check out some of those sister shows, if you want to write in just like Left Eye Lazy did as part of the Steam docket and get your questions read on the air, guess what? There's a bunch of ways you can do all that and much more. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places you can get involved all over the web, all the ways that you can show your support or join the community. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. So, Chris Gabe wrote in on Discord just like you can for the Steam docket and said, "Is it the Steam Deck 2?" No, but we did get an update on the Steam Deck 2, didn't we, Steve?
We did. So Valve's been doing the rounds, obviously, as part of this launch for the OLED model, and they've been sending out various people. Not the usual duo of Lawrence Yang and Plagman. We've got some different people going around and speaking to people. And Valve had an interview with Tom Phillips over at Eurogamer, and their hardware engineer Yazan Older Hayat, sorry if I butchered your name, said
That
that
looks right to me. Yeah, old Hayat.
said that obviously we'd love to get even more performance in the same power envelope, but that technology doesn't exist yet. That's what I think we would call a Steam Deck 2.0.
I love that as an answer. It's extremely transparent, and it's like it feels like a little bit of a flex to be like, "Look, we're thinking about it, but the technology's just not there yet." You know, what's next for the Steam Deck 2 is gonna blow your hair back.
I think it's also a bit of a dig at the competition, right? Because they are getting more performance, but at double the power envelope. So they're going up to like 30-watt TDP, whereas the Steam Deck's kind of sitting around that 15-watt mark. And obviously, if they could just bump up to 30, you'd have no battery life whatsoever on the Steam Deck because it already with the current model, you're getting like an hour to an hour and a half in some AAA games. I'd imagine that's probably going to go up now to 2 hours to 2 hours 15 with the 30 to 50% improvement on battery life in the OLED model. But even still, if you then doubled it to 30-watt TDP, you're back down to an hour. And I don't think that's the right call.
No, I agree with you, and I think it speaks to Valve's vision for this device, right? And it's a point you made on a previous episode where, like, when you look at the Aya Neos and some of these other competitors of the world, right? Like, because they are hardware companies first, it makes sense that every year they're like, here's the new benchmark. We eked out a little bit more power. You know, we have this beefier model that you can spend more money on because that's where all their money comes from, right? But for Valve and what they're trying to do with the Steam Deck, they're trying to court that more traditional console market of like creating this standardized experience that is gonna, be even as you iterate, even as you maybe adjust the screen or improve battery life or do these other things that like the base level benchmark that we're trying to target is going to remain the same for enough of a stretch of time that you can sell, millions of this device, right? Which we'll talk about in a minute here, and have a baseline target that developers can target, and that you can have this, kind of parity, right, across the line, and that you and me and whoever else owns a Steam Deck can have that same experience, right? And that's why I think there is such a strong community around, you know, um, homebrew on deck and all these things, because it's like you have a device that has the limitations that it has, and limitations breed creativity, right? And like when you know what the thing can and can't do, you start asking the questions of, well, can we push that a little further? What else can it, and it's so much easier to communicate that and get people to buy in and want to join the movement and be a part of it when you've got like three options, right? But at the end of the day, they're all the same device. Whereas if I was like, hey, I want to get an Aya Neo, I mean, they've got literally
First of all,
dozens
it's
of
which
devices
one,
I'd have to
right?
choose
Yeah,
from.
it's like, where do I start? Which form factor do you want? What power level do you want? What level of storage? What level of RAM? What level of CPU, GPU do you want? That's where it gets like confusing. But those are enthusiast devices. I think Valve really is trying to make this as accessible as possible, a gateway to PC gaming, where people look at it and they're like, oh, so it's a Switch, but it's more powerful and I can play more games and it's not just limited to Nintendo stuff. Like when you look at it like that, it makes a lot of sense.
I
And
think it's both, which is why it's so good. Is like it is an enthusiast device, but it is
yeah,
simple enough that you can get a normie who just wants to play Hollow Knight or whatever on Steam, and they're like, yeah, great, I can do that. I can buy a device and download games to it. I can nail that part, right? And if you do want to be the person that cracks it open and puts a new screen in it or throws in a new SSD or whatever, great. Well, the device is made for that type of user. But if you're not that type of user, you can still get a ton of value out of it and not feel like you bought this expensive niche toy that maybe you don't really have a use case for.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really exciting. I'm glad that we're getting this mid-gen refresh. But yeah, as Yazan said over at Eurogame, it's definitely not a Steam Deck 2. The level of performance just is not there for a Steam Deck 2. One thing I wanted to touch on though, kind of before we move on from the Steam Deck 2 and onto how many Steam Decks they've sold in general, is I was really hoping we would get some like upgrade kits. Remember, we spoke about that. I think it was a couple of years ago, well, a couple of months ago at this point. Where when a new model or a new screen came out or a new battery came out, that we'd be able to go to iFixit and buy the new screen to put that in, or buy a bigger battery to put in. Unfortunately, it looks like none of that's gonna be possible. The new battery doesn't fit in the old model of Steam Deck, the LCD model, so the 50 watt-hour battery is specific to the OLED model, and the screen's not gonna be compatible either, which is a real shame. I'd like to see a third party, um, come in and kind of corner that market if Valve's not gonna do it themselves, to make it so we can get either an OLED panel in there or a bigger battery in there in the existing LCD models, because it would have been nice to see that if it was, possible.
Yeah, it is a shame, and it speaks to the ever changing nature of these devices, right? Like as they iterate and make those small adjustments, right? Like there are going to have to be things inside the case that change, and you can't always have that perfect modular experience. And it is a shame. You would hope that there would either be like a third party solution, or maybe that through their partnership with iFixit they could figure something out, because like you said, right? There are those users that maybe just recently bought a Steam Deck, and like it is kind of a shame, right? To be, I don't want to say punished, but like you have this, negative outcome of you being an early adopter and wanting to support the original model, right? And then now you're missing out on some of those bells and whistles, and you don't have the ability to upgrade unless you want to shell out for a new unit. And that's not Valve's fault, right? It's not like I'm sitting here like I can't believe they did this, but you would hope that there could be a solution for folks who are, now owners of what has be very quickly become an outdated model.
Yeah, it's It's a shame. I mean, it happens to all technology, right? You know, you could have bought like a new iPhone and then they bring out the new one the kind of the next month. But I think
Right.
with those kind of products, we knew what cycle they were on, right? With the Steam Deck, we kind of had no idea. And they were talking just a couple of months ago in the press about how Steam Deck 2 is a ways off. We're not going to get a Steam Deck 2 anytime soon. And obviously, that is true. This is not the Steam Deck 2. This is just a refresh, but we had no idea that a refresh this large was coming. We kind of thought it was just going to be a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth upgrade, and that was going to be it, and not just like this gorgeous OLED HDR screen with all these battery life improvements and even more. So I could see some people being
Yeah.
upset about it.
Do we think this is the device they must have patented, right, that we were talking about a couple weeks ago that had that designation that was similar to the deck?
That's the one that went through the FCC. So that is this
Yeah.
device. So this device has Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth
There we go.
5.3, which is the two radios that they were doing. And they managed to get it through sneakily without having to show off the device at the FCC.
Good on them. So let's close things out with an update on the number of Steam Decks sold. Right, I alluded to this a second ago, but we have gotten a confirmation from Valve, specifically from Lawrence Yang and Pierre Loup Griffet, who told The Verge that they have sold multiple millions of our favorite portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. So this is the first update we've gotten since the announcement that they had sold 1 million units, right? Which was what? I
Last
mean,
December, something like that. They
yeah.
had the cake and everything, right? They never actually confirmed that either. That was just an internal thing. We never knew exactly how many,
Right,
but
because if memory serves, it was somebody who was not, I don't think, from Valve, but was a
no, it was from
collaborator.
KDE. Yeah, it was from
Right, and
KDE
they
who
had
did the
said,
plasma stuff, plasma work on the desktop version.
right, and they had he had commented, "Oh, they just passed 1,000,000 units sold or whatever," and there was no official confirmation, but everybody kinda took that one to the bank based on, their knowledge of the inner workings of the device. So, to see this now, right, that seems to give us confirmation that if we sold 1,000,000 in the first year and change on the market, right, or under a year, um, seemingly the multiplier's moving now, right? That we're getting multiple millions, moved in its second year. So that's pretty great to see.
Look, products now sell by word of mouth, and the more people that have it, the more people are talking about it, and the more people that see them and are excited by them. The fact that they've managed to achieve that without having to use traditional distribution models, they're not in any stores outside of Asia, they're only selling online direct to consumer through their own marketplace. You can't go on Amazon and buy one of these like you can with the Switch. I think is really impressive. I'd like to kind of see them move into some of those more traditional models. I think if they can get in Best Buy alongside an ROG Ally, and people look at the difference in screens and they kind of see what games can play on both of them, and they see the price discrepancy, because the Steam Deck now, the 512 gigabyte model with the OLED is now cheaper than the 512 ROG Ally. And I think that really is going to sell a lot more of these than if I was maybe on the fence and looking at the ROG Ally and going, "Wow, it's got a slightly nicer screen and I can get the same storage for a similar price point," I'm probably not even gonna bother now. I'm gonna go for the Steam Deck because I know it's gonna be well supported like it has been over the last 2 years. I know the software is gonna continue to be improved, and I know that this is gonna be sticking around for at least 2 years before the next version of the Steam Deck comes out, so I don't really have to worry about, "Oh, there's gonna be a new model next year from ROG or a new model from Ioneo, and this one's gonna be
Totally.
defunct and not really supported anymore."
Yeah, yeah. I think we're in a good spot now, right? Like if you haven't picked it up, or if you're maybe ready for a mid-gen refresh, I think we've got at least 2 to 3 years before we're going to be seeing another substantial step forward like this. So you're safe to either buy your first deck or take your mid-gen refresh and be happy with it. I think either way, you're in a pretty good spot, right? And it's a good time to be a deck owner. Really excited to see, to get hands on this and to see, what else it opens up and what are some other games that maybe weren't able to get deck verified before, or people weren't able to get running on deck in a satisfactory way that now are an option. It's very exciting to think what this could mean for opening up the library.
I don't know that the performance is gonna be big enough for that, and I also think that the deck verified scheme's probably still going to target the lowest common denominator,
That's
which
why I
will be
corrected
the
myself.
yeah,
Not the
it'll
deck
be the
verified, but, the
I,
community will
I
get it
think people will
working.
be able to eke out a little bit more performance out of games. I know 2 to 3 frames per second seems negligible, but it can be enough between
I mean,
a smooth experience and a stuttery experience.
one of the best examples I can point to, right, is at launch, Starfield was running at like 27 FPS or something like that. That 3 frames could be the difference between that and 30 feels smooth comparatively, right? Like,
Mhm.
that is a big difference, and that is a game that, that extra couple percent would have been the difference maker at launch. So,
Yeah.
and granted, we
Yeah.
got it running now, but extra couple percents, maybe it'll run a little
And you
smoother.
play it at launch, you don't have to wait for the patches and the updates and stuff, and
Yeah,
it's just there.
you love
And
to
not
see
to
that.
mention games that are gonna look so smooth at 90 hertz, like Digital Foundry in their video showed off Ori and the Will of the Wisps running in HDR at 90 hertz, and oh
Awesome.
my god, I watched that on my OLED TV and it just looked phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal.
Exciting stuff. So, if you guys want to write in and let us know what you think about the OLED Steam Deck, are you going to pick one up? Are you going to get one at launch? Is this something that you're maybe happy to wait for a Steam Deck 2 in 2 to 3 years? I would love to hear from those of you in the community. Whether you just got your Steam Deck, whether you are an early adopter like us, is this something that appeals to you? Is this something you're down to plunk that extra money down for that 30 to 50% battery increase and the higher quality screen? Right? What for what many of us have been clamoring for. I am very interested to hear from you guys in the community and let us know what if this isn't it, what needs to happen for you to make that upgrade, right? Or are you just locked in until we get to Steam Deck 2? That's my question for you, the
Which is
audience.
what I was with the Switch. I was like, the OLED model came and it was just the screen. It was not enough for me to buy it because it was just the screen. But this is more than just the screen, and I think the only thing that's left is performance. Like every other box has been checked.
I mean, Digital Foundry said they couldn't find a game that ran slower. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It's not a performance upgrade.
That's
Who's to say?
true. That is
Who's to say?
true.
Who's to say? So make sure you guys write in. Remember, flipscreen.games. That's the website where you will find links to all the places that you can get involved, get in touch, or show your support. However, you choose to be a part of the Flipscreen Games community, we thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.